Hey guys, Tarke here, and I've prepared a whole bunch of builds for 3.9. All of these builds are my favorite types of builds, damage over time builds. Damage over time builds are, in my opinion, the best builds to learn bosses because you fire and forget, run around dodge mechanics. Metamorph is around bosses, Conquers the Atlas is around bosses. Nearly all of these trees are just tree templates, they're not full gear and everything because we don't know what the gear is going to look like. But none of these builds are dependent on any uniques, they're just equip rares. If you're going for the Chaos Damage over time, get the Chaos Damage over time multiplier on weapons. If you're doing the Fire version, Fire Damage over time multiplier on weapons. If you're doing the Cold version, Cold Damage over time multiplier on weapons. I've also included a tree from my good friend Octavian and a tree from my good friend Derrok. And most of these trees have multiple different setups with different ascendancies. Just to cover it before we go into each one, we have a Burning Fire Trap, or just generic like Fireball Ignite trees, Caustic Arrow setups, Bane setups, Explosive Arrow and Burning Arrow setups, Cold Vortex / Cold Snap setups, Octavian's Toxic Rain Minor, and a Soulrend tree. We'll just go from the top down to the bottom. Links of everything will be down below. So this is the Burning Ground Fire Trapper. I played this last league and had a lot of fun with it. Octavian also played this, so if you wanted to go into his profile, you could peek what his character looked like in trade, fully min-maxed. But it's a very tanky tree, which I like, with 206% life as options, going Mind Over Matter very easily if you want to mess around with your aura setups. But all of that, I've just gone pure life safe options for everything, because we don't really know what the new content's going to look like, what the new map mods we're going to have, what the new item mods we're going to have. We might have some very cool new item mods which might enable some very cool like hybrid setups or Eldritch Battery setups, or Mind Over Matter setups. So just use these as rough bases and change them. These are all they're meant to be. Most of these trees will be around level 90 to like 95-ish. This is a level 98 tree, but it's got like all the jewels. So if you're like, how do I cut the points for League Start? Cut like all the jewels, and then you're looking at like a level 92 tree, and then you're like, well, I don't need all this damage here, and then you're looking at like a level 80 something tree. You see what I mean? So it's pretty straightforward. For leveling this kind of a build, you want to get the early quality of life. Thank you, phone. Go for like Saboteur, go for Expeditious Munitions, rush on over to Elemental Overload. You're going to proc your Elemental Overload. I'm just going to put my phone on mute. Through a few different setups. Options will include going for like Orb of Storms or whatever, like casting damage taken, easy setups. Also gone for a Fireball Ignite tree. Fireball Ignite has been super underappreciated for a very long time. This tree takes Acro and it also gets Piercing Shots, so that nice clean map clear. Alternatively, you could get Fork. We have the Awakened Fork support gem, which is pretty nice for map clear. You can also get Fork on a few different unique items. But until you get access to those cool things, you can just use Piercing Shots and have Acro. And this is just a very clean level 90 tree with a bunch of jewels, a respectable 177% life, and if you cut all the jewels, because you're like League Start with 0 gear, you've got level 80 tree with 177 life and all the damage you'd want there. So really, really nice, very clean. I can attest this build is a solid build, and you can supplement the single target of this build with a fire trap setup. Would highly recommend that. This is something I'm very much considering League starting on. It's a little bit boring because it's nothing new, but it's very solid. Caustic Arrow. Caustic Arrow is probably what I'm leaning into the most. It's also what most people are expecting me to go for. Caustic Arrow received a couple of buffs. So enemy resistances to Chaos has gone up, but they've buffed the base damage of Caustic Arrow by about 200 flat. And there's also a new mod you can get on Quivers, which is increased damage over time multiplier. My trees are both 2 Trickster variants. There is a very good Caustic Arrow Raider guide on the forums, which if you just Google Raider Caustic Arrow guide, it will come up. The guy's been doing the same build in like hardcore SSF for multiple leagues now. Raider got buffed last league. Very solid. Advantage of that build over this build will be smoother to level because Trickster gets access to a bunch of damage early, and you can just have a much smoother time leveling. That version will be a lot nicer for stuff like delving, because Raid is very good for delving because it's got very high avoidance. But anyway, I've got 2 different setups. One is just kind of like get all the damage, get all the basic stuff set up. And then the other one is a bit tankier, and it gets access to a Timeless Jewel. So this is something you maybe transition to later into the league. And you'd probably go for like the Kintsugi Wind Dancer kind of vibe there. So yeah, you've got like your basic. I'm just going to take all the deeps nodes, get all the good stuff. And then you've got like a Timeless Jewel setup. And again, I just threw a bow on. And they've like killed multi-modding, but you can very easily craft a weapon that just looks like this. And simulate what your damage will look like, and it's all fairly realistic. You can level as Caustic Arrow, you can also level as Toxic Rain. You've got options there, both work, whatever you prefer. If you do a Toxic Rain build, definitely get both of the duration clusters, it's very important. This is Derrok's Bane build. Derrok is considering league starting this. If you don't know Derrok, he's my good old hideout friend. He also very regularly pushes 100 races in the trade league, and he always goes to like 40 challenges in the first week or so. His builds are always incredibly good league starters because that's all he really cares about. But you can see he's got a very basic budget setup with a 1 million DoT DPS on his Bane, and it's got 186% life, accurate phase acro, it's got all the curse stuff. Pretty solid, pretty solid. These are a couple of different Exposed Feral Burning Arrow trees. All these trees are pretty interchangeable, so you could level as one, swap between the two, pick whichever one you prefer. Don't use EE on the Burning Arrow trees. That's mostly just there for the Exposed Feral builds, but I'll go through a few different options. For Explosive Arrow, you have the option of Chieftain, Berserker, and Jug for Marauder. All three would work. A big thing of Exposed Arrow is going to be applying as many fuses as possible. Berserker's got a whole bunch of attacks and a whole bunch of damage. Pretty good. Chieftain's got a very nice balance between damage and defense. You get endurance charges with some damage there. Whole bunch of mitigation here. Whole bunch of damage. And then you get Covered in Ash, which is a whole bunch of damage and defense because you slow enemies. You also get a little bit of leech. So yeah, I'd make the tree look something sort of like that. It feels a bit awkward having to route into Duelist this way, but this is a very nice node. You're going to want to anoint this eventually onto every single Ignite build that can't take this, because the damage over time multiplier and the faster dealing ignites is just really solid. But yeah, it's a level 95 tree with a bunch of jewels, 221% life, all the damage nodes. Very easy to cut from it. Cut excess 2-point jewels, cut excess life nodes because you don't need 221% life. And then just fill in the nodes as you go on. Champion is a pretty solid option as well for both Explosive Arrow or Burning Arrow. You get Fortify, you get Cannot Be Stunned, pretty good. Yes, Fortify got nerfed, it's still very solid. You get some more damage reduction in here, and then you get 20% increased damage. Pretty nice, pretty nice. Would recommend this if you wanted like a slightly different setup to Marauder. You want to kind of mix between damage and defense. Range is going to be mostly clear speed options. I think all three options, Raider, Deadeye, and Pathfinder, are valid. Pick whichever one you prefer. I did a Raider version because a lot of people are on Raider at the moment, but just swap the points around. One of the nice things about doing this as a Ranger compared to the other options, you won't have any issues with dex requirements. Marauder will struggle with dex early on. You also won't need to mule a bunch of jewels and gems and stuff over if you're like league starting an SSF, or even in a trade league. You don't have to worry about like buying gems off vendors, and you can actually level as the build, which is pretty cool. So you'd level as Burning Arrow, then transitioned into Exposed Arrow, just level the whole thing as Burning Arrow. 218% life, good amount of clear speed because all three of these options give you nice clear speed options. All the important damage nodes, a bunch of mana stuff, which is pretty nice. And yeah, you kind of go that way. Again, for Burning Arrow, don't take Elemental Equilibrium. Some Trickster versions. These are going to look pretty similar to my other Ignite builds. I'm not too sold on Trickster, but it's something you could do. Trickster for Explosive Arrow is also a little bit weird because it has increased skill effect duration tied in to Prolonged Pain. But having skill effect duration might be a good thing because you'll have longer to stack up fuses on bosses. Yes, the fuses will explode slightly. They'll take so long for them to explode for map clear, but it shouldn't be too noticeable. So there'll be a slightly bigger delay between your map clear, but you'll still like clear everything just fine with Prolif and everything. But your single target will be kind of interesting there. This is a version with no acro. And then I did Explosive Arrow Mines tree. If I was to play Explosive Arrow, and I was like, I only want to play Explosive Arrow, I'd do Explosive Arrow Mines, and I'll do a tree looking something kind of like this. If I was undecided between Burning Arrow or Explosive Arrow, I'd probably go with either the Marauder or the Ranger versions, but again, all of these will be linked down below. The reason to Explosive Arrow mines is you do, like, Explosive Arrow, whatever mine support you want, Remote Mine Barrage, and then you just stack up a ridiculous amount of charges, and you stack, like, all the Ignite multipliers, and it's kind of memey, and you get loads of AoE. I don't know, it's kind of fun, but yeah, those are all things to consider. I think that going for a Burning Arrow or Explosive Arrow setup will be the safest option. Going for a pure Explosive Arrow setup might be a bit questionable, because we just don't know how good it will feel until we actually play it. Vortex / Cold Snap is an incredibly safe League starter, always has been. If you don't want to play it as Occultist, you can also do it as Trickster, just swap out like the 5 points, but it's pretty straightforward. Gone for Life, because it's the easiest for people to League start with. If you're like, how do I cut the points? Cut the 2-point jewels. But yeah, get all the curse nodes, get all the damage over time nodes, get all the life nodes. Solid. Solid. Would recommend. This is Octavian's Toxic Rain tree. If you want to cut points from it, cut the 2-point jewels, cut some fluff nodes. I added Herbalism onto his tree, because his tree was like 160 life, which was a bit low. But it looks pretty solid. He has played the build, he's loving it, he really enjoys it. And I trust Octavian's build making, so if you want to do Toxic Rain Mines, this is what I'd recommend. And then finally, a Soulrend tree. Soulrend did receive some buffs. You can also use this kind of tree as a base for Essence Ray Contagion, or anything else kind of along those lines. And, yeah, did I do just a Trickster? I did a Trickster and an Occultist, but it's just the same thing. I stack a whole bunch of attack speed, cast speed. The reason why I stack a bunch of cast speed is cast speed makes Soulrend feel good. It's also, I'd recommend Trickster over Occultist. If you are going to do Occultist Soulrend, I'd probably go Blight, Castle, Channeling Soulrend. It's more damage, but it's worse map clear, and it will just feel better on a Trickster. For all the Trickster trees that I've shown people, I've gone for this setup. There's nothing wrong with Escape Artist. Escape Artist is still good. It's just that's generally very good when you start like stacking some very powerful items and like synergies on top of each other. And not everyone will have access to all of that stuff, and that's slightly higher IQ. So if just base starter trees, things that will just get you from like level 1 into the end game, will kill the bosses. These are the base things I'd recommend. None of these trees have had an insane amount of thought put into them, other than what are builds I would recommend and be happy to give to people. Some other options that aren't included here would be lightning traps, mines, anything, and whatever summoner build Uber Elite plays. But I stand by every single one of these trees. They're all damage over time builds, which are my favorite type of builds. And again, in my personal opinion, damage over time builds are the best builds to learn bosses on, because you set up your damage and then you just watch the fight. Any builds where you're constantly having to attack, you're worried, you're panicking, you're losing out your downtime. One of the issues you'll have with like very flashy builds is if you have a very flashy build, then you might actually miss the mechanics. None of these builds are visually that intense, which I quite like, which is another reason why I highly recommend them. What am I personally going to League start on? Not entirely decided yet. Probably some kind of Ignite build or Caustic Arrow. But yes, I'm Tarke. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And finally, for the YouTube people out there, I am running a private league. Link to the private league will be linked down below. If you'd like to join my private league, everyone is welcome. Hope you're all well. Bye-bye.